Oh, hang on. Yes, hang on. According to this, I can't. Yes, youth, you may now leave. I think I gave you 18 seconds. Thank you, Sharon. I did forget that.
The first reading is from Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 12 to 22. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to love him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I am giving you today for your own good. To the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. Yet the Lord set his affection on your ancestors and loved them, and he chose you, their descendants, above all the nations, as it is today. Circumcise your hearts, therefore, and do not be stiff-necked any longer. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. Fear the Lord your God and serve him. Hold fast to him and take your oaths in his name. He is your praise, he is your God, who performed for you those great and awesome wonders you saw with your own eyes. Your ancestors who went down into Egypt were 70 in all, and now the Lord your God has made you as numerous as the stars in the sky. And now the second reading is from Luke chapter 6, verses 46 to 49. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When the flood came in, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it, because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck the house, it collapsed, and its destruction was complete. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Rhythm of life as God's people, which is that we are called to serve. Last week, we looked together at how prayer had been a part of the rhythm of life for God's people since the earliest times. We also pinched ourselves to realize that the God who made the heavens and the earth and everything in it was interested in talking to us and listening to us. This week, we're looking at another element of what it is to be God's people, serving God. And interestingly, this also goes right back to the very beginning of God's people. The reading that Hannah read for us, and thank you, Hannah, for reading it so well, comes from the earliest time of God's people. Moses was speaking to the people of Israel. They'd been wandering in the desert for 40 years, and they were just on the brink of getting into the promised land, the land that God had called them out of Egypt, had protected them on their way, and given to them to be their inheritance. And Moses is speaking to the people of Israel, saying, this is who you are. This is what matters to you. Because having been a nomadic people, they were going to become a settled people. Having never been a people on their own, they were going to be mixing and mingling with people of other races, other tribes, people who served other gods. And so Moses was saying, this is who you are. You are the people of God. And the first thing he says is, the God whom you serve is the maker of everything. The picture we looked at last week. That amazing thing that the God who made everything is sufficiently interested in us to say, no, I want you to serve me. What you do matters. What you do is important to me, the God who made you. We're now going to do something that we've not been able to do for a couple of years. I'm going to invite you to turn to page 189 in the Bibles in the chairs. And we're going to look together at what Moses said to those people of Israel as he challenged them to serve the God who made them, the maker of everything. Page 189. Because serving God, first of all, is a matter about who God is. The people that they were going to mingle with served all sorts of local tribal gods. If you read your Old Testament, there were some horrible things going on. Child sacrifices, ritual prostitution. The gods that other people served were frankly horrible, abominable. But the people of Israel were called, first of all, to serve the maker of everything. Verse 14. If you look on then to verse 15, he wasn't just the one who made everything, he was the one who chose them. The Lord set his affection on their ancestors and loved them and chose them. They were God's people. The God who made everything had said to these people, you are mine. And he showed that particularly in a very important way, because he set them free. They had been slaves in Egypt, and God set them free, we see in verse 19. If you read the Ten Commandments, they begin, I am the Lord your God, who set you free from slavery in Egypt. Have no other gods but me. God didn't just sort of start issuing commands. God said, I made you my people. I've loved you. I have done all I can for you. Worship me. Be my people. That command and that invitation didn't come just like a solid, bleak instruction. It was an invitation to love the God who had already loved them. And in setting his people free, God performed mighty works. Just read the story of the Exodus from Egypt, how God saved them repeatedly. They walked across the Red Sea. They were able to be freed from an almost impossible, unbearable slavery. And God took them and nursed them and took them and made them his people. But then there's something surprising in this. Because not only is the God who chose those people, who set them free, who performed mighty works, but he's a very particular God. He's a God who defends the weak. And so this God is not like all those other gods who just demand service. This God is the God who invented kindness and love and care and a compassion for those who are suffering. And that is the God who called them to be his people. The God that we recognize, the God that we serve, the mighty God, but the God who bends towards his earth in love and cares for his people. So if that was the God that they were called to serve, how were they called to serve him? Well, this passage covers both things, not just who they're serving, God, but how they're serving him. Let's look at what God invites them to do. And the first thing in verse 12, what does the Lord your God ask of you? But to fear the Lord your God. Now that word doesn't mean sort of craven, cowering fear. It means to be in awe of. And who could not be in awe of the God who made the world and everything in it, and all the beauty that we see, and all the enormity of his creation? So God says, I made all this. You're my people. Stand in awe of what you see and love me as I loved you. How should they love him? With all their hearts and with all their souls. That is there also in verse 12. So serving God is, if you like, and we'll see this repeatedly, it's not about doing things. We may do things to serve God, but serving God, first and foremost, is an attitude of mind. It's saying, you are my God, and I love you. That is the beginning of service. It then goes on, if you look in verse 13, to observe the Lord's commands. God cared that his people were moral people. God cared that they were generous people. God cared that they were people who valued human life and valued their families. So he said, be obedient to my commands, not just because they're arbitrary commands. It's not just to do what I say because I'm God and you're human, because I'm big and you're little. It's do what I say because my commands are for your good. I want the best for you. And you may get it wrong, and boy, if you read your first 5 books of the Bible, you'll know how wrong they managed to get it. This passage that we've got comes very shortly after Moses has reminded them that they built a golden calf, and they decided they'd worship a golden calf, an inanimate object of their own making. And God said, no, my commands are good for you. Worship the living God, not a dead golden statue. And worshipping God also, if you have a look at verse 19. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourself were foreigners in Egypt. Fear the Lord your God, serve him, hold fast to him, take your oaths in his name. They were to be like God. They were to do all they could to live lives that they thought were the life of God, to imitate what God did in his love and his care for all people, particularly, this is so interesting, isn't it? God cares particularly for the vulnerable. So when we feel we want to support the people of Ukraine, when we feel that their plight is horrible, we're actually just echoing what God's already thought about them. And if we try and do something to help, we're doing what God has invited us to do and what God himself is doing. Now that was what Moses was saying to the people of Israel way back, long before Jesus was born. We live in different times. Most significantly, we live in the light of God's supreme intervention in history, when God became human and walked and talked and healed and lived and died and rose again in the form of Jesus. And that beautiful and history-changing intervention changed some things in terms of our relationship with God, but left others just the same. And we're going to look at that just now. Firstly, though God's character didn't change, Jesus revealed new depths to the intimacy that God felt for his people and that we could feel for him. Jesus said, when you talk to God, say Daddy. The God who made the world, the God who gave the people of Israel those commands, Jesus said, treat him as your daddy. His love for you is intimate and close and personal. But the second thing that changed with Jesus is that we saw even more clearly just what God's love meant and how much God was prepared to pay to love his people. We see in Jesus' death that God's love was unsearchable, unfathomable. It was more than we could ever imagine. But also we saw that that love was stronger than death, and that that love could extend forgiveness to us. It broadened who God's people were. Gentiles like you and me were drawn into God's family, but all people, Jew and Gentile alike, were forgiven because Jesus paid the price for all the wrong that we'd done. And he proved that his love, that God's love, is stronger than death. So what does that mean in terms of the people of God now and how we serve God? Well, in many ways, our service of God is very similar to the service that God required from his people in the Old Testament. God does tell us to be in awe of him and love him, but we have even more reason to do so. Because he's not just the God who made the world, he's the God who healed the world. He's the God who came and sought us and saved us and found us. He's the God who's offered us eternal life. All the more reason to be in awe of him and to love him. All the more reason to give our hearts and our souls to God. And when Jesus said, in answer to a question, he was asked, how should we serve God? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. There is no other commandment greater than this. He was actually just reciting back what God's people had to do all along. But now the reason for doing it was stronger and greater because we had a clearer and fuller understanding of just how great God's love was for us. After I've preached, we're going to be singing The Servant King, which reminds us just the lengths that Jesus went to save us and call us back to God. As Hannah read to us, serving God does mean being obedient to his commands. We need to build our house on rock, as Jesus said, not on sand. Because if we build our house on rock, then we will weather the storms of life. And that rock is the words of Jesus. So we should imitate him, we should hear what he says, and we should love the people that he loves. Not just the foreigners, but all those who are marginalised and lost and whose lives have been destroyed. Those are the people that Jesus made a beeline for in his earthly ministry. And we are told to imitate him in the way that we live our lives. So that is how we're called to serve. But we wanted this sermon series to be practical. Service, yes, is ultimately and most importantly an attitude of mind. It is our grateful response to the God who loved us and the God who saved us. We say, how can I help? Thank you, Lord. How can I help? Service is, if you like, worship in action. We want to worship God and we say, well, what can I do? Worship in action is a good way of thinking about service. But what then should we do? These are just a few pointers of things that we might actually practically do if we're saying, well, God, how do you want me to serve you? I want to serve you. How should I do it? First of all, Use the gifts that God's given you. Paul talks so much about that in his letters. The fact that we are all different. We all have different gifts. So use the gifts that God's given us. And those gifts, some of them are quite exciting and others of them are very, very ordinary. But boy, the gift of administration is valuable. Makes things work. Whatever the gifts we've got, use them. Because God gave them to you, not anyone else. And God wants us to use his gifts, our gifts, in his service. Follow your passions. I think often we're quite passionate where our gifts lie. But if God made you love something, then do it for God, if you possibly can. Remember that lovely bit in Chariots of Fire? Hands up if you've seen Chariots of Fire. Lovely film, yeah. Where Eric Liddell is challenged that he really ought to go to the mission field, which he ultimately did. And there's a sort of censorious elder church person speaking to him. And he says, well, why don't you go onto the mission field? That's what God made you for. And he says words to the effect, God may have made me for that, but he also made me fast. And I feel his joy when I run. If you love it, then do it for God. Find out where the need is. If there is a need, just use your eyes and your ears. And if you think, maybe I could help here, then find Kathy with a clipboard at Sunnyside. But it's not just, all our service doesn't have to be in Sunnyside. Our service is where God calls us. But find out where the need is, because God does want you. And even if you feel, well, maybe that's not where my gifts lie, often God can equip us. If we notice a need and think, well, I'll try it. God will often give us the skills that we need and the enthusiasm that we need. And be prepared to be prompted. So if you're talking to God about this, he might just say, well, put a seed of thought in your mind. A friend might put a seed of thought in your mind when you're talking to them. A member of your family might put a seed in your mind when you're talking to them. But be prepared. Just think, oh, well, maybe I could do that. I think it's really important that we shouldn't sort of wait and think, well, maybe I'll serve next year or when I've done this. Jesus was very keen that people who are called to follow him were called to do it now, where they were. And so it may be that in 5 years' time, God's calling you to do something very important, very exciting. But it doesn't mean he wants you lying fallow for the next 5 years. Think about what you can do here and now in the place that you are. And it may, or it may not, involve your paid work. Many of us serve God, or have served God. I speak as a man who is retired, through our work. But it's not always like that. Paul was a tent maker, but he's not remembered as one of the great tent makers of history. He is remembered as the person who interpreted God and interpreted Jesus' death and resurrection to the world. Our service may or may not involve our paid work. Now, today is Mothering Sunday. And as our final thought, I just want to think about service in the context of Mothering Sunday. Because service often involves serving people here that we know. And it's good to remember and be thankful for those who've served God by protecting us and nurturing us as a mother does. I'm aware that all our experiences of mothers will be different. Some of them will be unadulterated joy. Some of them will be more measured and troubled. But let us remember and be thankful for what those who have nurtured us, be they our mothers, but also our fathers, those who've helped us and seen us vulnerable and built us up and sent us on our way. It is right and good that on this day we remember and are thankful to God for what they've done. I think it's also important to be aware that we may only be aware of the tip of the iceberg of the love that we've been offered. I think it's often said it's only when you're a parent that you understand how much your parents did for you. So you've got a bit of a weight there, Patrick and Rachel, a bit of a weight, because we do a lot for our children, we know that. But let's remember that we only see the very little bit of what those who've nurtured us and loved us do for us. And let us today, and we'll do this I think at the end of the service, won't we, Luke? Collect posies of flowers, and those posies of flowers are just a way of saying thank you to those who have loved us and nurtured us and sent us on our way. So, service, it is, if you like, worship in action. It's worship saying to God, how best can I worship you? So let's just end with a moment of quiet and ask that question of God. Lord God, we love you, we worship you. How can we help? Amen.